What if I told you that scattering someone's ashes in the wrong place could alter their soul's journey for lifetimes? That the moment you choose where to place their remains, you're not just handling the final fragments of a body, you're impacting the very energy that remains tethered to the spirit. Would you still treat it like a casual decision? Or would you pause, breathe, and consider that you're standing at the edge of a sacred threshold? If you've ever held an urn in your hands, if you've stood at a hilltop or by the ocean, wondering where to scatter the ashes of someone you love, you know the weight of that moment. It's not just emotional. It's energetic. It's spiritual. What you may not have realized is that this act, one that seems so final and symbolic, can either support a soul's elevation or delay its journey entirely. There are laws that govern this unseen dimension, laws that aren't written in books or taught in schools, but they govern just as precisely as gravity or time. These are spiritual laws, laws that speak not to the intellect, but to the vibration of consciousness itself. Cremation is often seen as a clean ending, a respectful return of the body to the elements. Fire purifies, ash remains, and we are left with what seems to be the last physical remnant of someone's life. But in many spiritual traditions, these ashes are not neutral. They are not dead matter. They are imprinted with energy, residual memory, emotional residue, and the soul's last connection to the physical world. That connection doesn't break instantly. It unravels, slowly, gently, or in some cases, not at all. The mistake many make is believing that once the body is cremated, the soul has moved on. But energy doesn't obey emotional convenience. The soul doesn't always leap into the light just because we wish it would. In reality, the moment of physical death is only the beginning of a transition, and how we handle the remains, what we do with the ashes, can either support that passage or create entanglement, and most people have no idea that this is even possible. Think about this. Everything in existence vibrates. Your thoughts, your voice, your breath, even your grief, it's all frequency. The ashes of a person who has transitioned still carry the last echoes of their vibration. Not just their DNA or cellular trace, but their essence, their signature. And like any energetic substance, it's sensitive to environment. It's reactive. The ashes don't just sit idly, they resonate. They interact with the space in which they're placed, the land, the water, the air, the people, the atmosphere of thought and feeling that surrounds them. So when someone casually scatters ashes at a location they think is beautiful, sentimental, or scenic, without tuning into the energy of that space, they may be unknowingly placing the soul's residue in a vibrational conflict. This doesn't mean the soul gets stuck forever, but it does mean the soul might linger, it might become confused. It might feel called back when it should be moving forward. The decision to scatter is not just symbolic, it's spiritual. And if you don't understand the laws of energy, you could be interfering with something sacred. This isn't said to scare you. It's not about superstition or gloom. It's about reverence. You weren't taught this because our culture fears what it doesn't understand. But just because something is invisible doesn't mean it's imaginary. In truth, it's the unseen that holds the greatest power. And death, real death, is not an end. It's a shift, a relocation of consciousness. And in those early stages after passing, the soul is sensitive. It is listening, watching, feeling. Its connection to the earth is still fresh, which means the energy it's surrounded by, especially in the moment you decide what to do with the remains, can influence its experience more than you realize. Most people don't know this. They scatter ashes out of love, out of ritual, out of the need to find closure. And that's understandable. But intention alone isn't enough. You have to understand vibration. You have to recognize that some places are energetically safe, while others are spiritually volatile. And it's not always obvious. Some of the most popular scattering locations carry hidden energetic imprints that can interfere with the soul's ability to fully release and ascend. These are the places you'll want to avoid. Not because they're cursed or haunted, but because they are vibrationally unstable. They disturb the frequency the soul needs to follow in order to return to its natural light. There are spiritual laws that mirror physical ones. Just as you wouldn't throw electrical wires into water without expecting consequences, you can't place energy-rich ashes in a vibrationally chaotic environment without creating an effect. These laws aren't punishing. They're responsive, they echo, they balance, they return to you the vibration you enter with. And when it comes to death, that feedback loop is intensified. So when you scatter ashes in a place that doesn't align with peace, resonance, or purity, you create friction, distortion, sometimes even spiritual confusion. The soul, when it leaves the body, is looking for alignment. It seeks clarity, direction, stillness. In the right conditions, it finds its next passage easily, like a feather caught in a soft current. But in distorted environments, that same soul might hover, search, loop back to familiar frequencies that no longer serve it. It may be pulled toward unresolved attachments, especially if its ashes are placed somewhere that stimulates emotional charge, karmic entanglement, or collective trauma. You may have seen signs of this without knowing what you were witnessing. Strange dreams, flickering lights, a heaviness in a room, grief that lingers far longer than it should, or even an unexplainable reluctance to move on. These aren't just symptoms of mourning. Sometimes they are symptoms of incomplete release. The soul wants to move on, but something about where it was left behind keeps calling it back. So this script is not about fear, it's not about regret, it's about sacred knowledge. Knowledge that was once widely known in ancient cultures, mystery schools, and spiritual lineages, but has been buried beneath centuries of materialism and convenience. It's time to bring it back, because the person you love, the one whose ashes you may one day carry, deserves more than sentiment. They deserve a transition into the next world that is clean, clear, vibrationally supported, and you deserve the peace of knowing that your act of letting go wasn't just beautiful, it was aligned. This is the first of many truths you were never told about cremation and the afterlife. But now you know, and once you know, you begin to see everything differently. Especially the places we once thought were safe to scatter, but in truth are anything but. What most people don't realize is that the ashes left behind after cremation are not just remnants of bone and fire. They are vessels of energetic memory. You may look at them and see dust, particles, something final and lifeless. But in truth, what you're holding contains a living trace, an echo of a soul's journey through this world. These ashes have been transformed by fire, yes, but they have not been emptied of presence. They hold the imprint of the one who once inhabited the body. Their pain, their joy, their thoughts, their desires, their attachments, these subtle vibrations linger, etched into the crystalline structure of the remaining matter. Like a fingerprint etched into smoke, the energy remains. The moment a person dies, their soul begins a transition. It's not an instant departure, it's more like a gentle unraveling, a loosening of the threads that once bound them to physical form. And during this time, something profound happens. The soul doesn't just exit, it imprints. It leaves behind subtle signatures, an energetic resonance, woven into every molecule it once touched. The skin, the organs, the bones, all hold memory. And when the body is reduced to ash, that memory doesn't vanish. It condenses. It crystallizes into something the naked eye cannot perceive, but the spirit still recognizes. These ashes carry more than remains. They carry the essence of someone's life. This is why, in many ancient traditions, ashes were treated not simply as waste or residue, but as sacred relics. In parts of the East, cremated remains were considered holy, even worthy of shrines. Not because they were idolized, but because they were respected. Because they carried pranic residue, the subtle energy that animates life. In metaphysical teachings, this energy is known to linger long after death. It's what creates the aura around sacred bones, the vibration around burial grounds, the sense of presence you sometimes feel even in a room long after someone has passed. Energy is not sentimental. It is structural. It doesn't just float, it embeds, and ashes are a vessel for that embedding. Now here's where it becomes critical. The energy within these ashes is not static. It responds to environment. Just as a tuning fork vibrates when it meets a similar frequency, so too do ashes resonate with the vibrations of the space they are placed in. If you scatter cremated remains in a place of harmony, a place of spiritual stillness or natural purity, the residual energy merges, dissolves, elevates. But if those same ashes are placed in a chaotic, heavy, or polluted vibrational field, the opposite can happen. The energy becomes distorted, trapped, even fragmented. This isn't just theoretical. If you've ever walked into a room after an argument and felt the tension lingering in the air, you've felt residual energy. Now imagine that on a much deeper level, applied to something as spiritually charged as cremated remains. The ashes are porous, not physically, but energetically. They absorb, they retain, they interact. And when the soul has not fully detached, when it is still in the early stages of transition, those interactions can influence its passage. This is why location matters, not just geographically, but vibrationally. There is such a thing as energetic compatibility. Some places hum at higher frequencies. They are sanctified by prayer, nature, stillness, or sacred history. Others vibrate at lower frequencies, shaped by trauma, excess, violence, or neglect. When you place ashes in a low-frequency environment, the residual energy of the soul can become weighed down by the surrounding atmosphere. It can confuse the vibrational imprint left behind, making it harder for the soul to fully release or ascend. In Eastern spiritual systems, this is understood deeply. There are reasons why monks meditate near water, why temples are built on mountains, and why certain directions are considered auspicious for burial or scattering. It's not superstition, it's resonance. The belief is that all matter and all spirit respond to frequency, and the final resting place of someone's remains isn't just symbolic, it's functional. It acts as an amplifier or disruptor of the soul's final transition. It either helps release the last threads of earthly attachment or reinforces them. That's where the concept of resonant burial comes in. Imagine the soul like a note on a piano. It's trying to return to its original chord, the divine frequency from which it came. If you place its ashes in a location that matches or complements its vibration, the transition is smooth, graceful, even beautiful. But if you place it in a space that clashes with its frequency, whether through emotional chaos, environmental toxins, or spiritual interference, the note becomes distorted. The soul may hesitate, echo back, or remain connected when it should be dissolving into peace. Resonant burial is about more than finding a pretty place. It's about listening, really listening, to the energy of a location before making it the final resting ground for a being who has just crossed the veil. Think of it like choosing the right soil for a seed. You wouldn't bury a rose in concrete and expect it to bloom. So why bury sacred ashes in a space that offers no nourishment for release? In metaphysical texts, there's a recurring theme: everything seeks return. Water returns to the ocean, breath returns to the wind, fire returns to light. The soul, too, seeks to return, to source, to peace, to resonance. But that return is not automatic. It can be delayed, misdirected, even disrupted by the environment it encounters. And the final placement of the ashes can either support or block that movement. This is not something to be feared, but to be honored. The ashes in your possession are more than powder. They are a spiritual transmitter, still faintly humming with the frequency of the life that once was. They're not haunted, they're holy, and they need your help to find their match, the vibrational space where they can rest, dissolve, release. So when you scatter ashes, when you choose that location, ask yourself, what does this space vibrate with? Is it love, peace, stillness, nature, light? Or is it grief, chaos, residue, history? Because the energy you choose will meet the energy that remains. And when the two align, something profound happens. A soul is released. A cycle is completed. A life finds closure not through fire alone, but through resonance. In the end, the question isn't just where to scatter, it's where to harmonize. Where will the ashes you hold find their vibrational home, and will you give them the gift, not just of rest, but of release? Have you ever stood at a crossroads and felt something strange in the air? Not just the rush of cars or the hum of nearby streets, but a deeper, quieter vibration, one that doesn't seem to belong to the physical world at all. Crossroads have always carried a certain mystique, a sense of being between places, between decisions, between destinies. And that feeling isn't just in your imagination, it's an ancient knowing. A recognition that, where paths intersect, energies collide. And while that might sound poetic, the truth is much more serious, especially when it comes to scattering ashes. Across cultures and centuries, crossroads have been treated with a mixture of reverence and caution. In many spiritual traditions, they are not merely meeting points of roads, they are intersections between worlds. In old European folklore, crossroads were places where the veil between the physical and the spiritual became thinner. Offerings were left there for spirits, rituals were performed to contact the dead, and in some cases, banishments were conducted at these very locations. Why? Because energy moves differently at crossroads. It's not linear, it's not contained, it's not predictable. It spirals, it diverges, it scatters. When you scatter ashes at a crossroads, you are not placing them in a peaceful, neutral space. You are casting them into an energetic vortex, one that pulls in multiple directions at once. These locations are not grounded, they are transitional. They are neither here nor there, they are everywhere and nowhere at the same time. And that's exactly what makes them dangerous for a soul that is trying to move forward on its journey. Imagine a newly departed soul trying to follow the natural pull toward the next realm, but instead of being surrounded by the gentle, guiding current of a single vibrational path, it finds itself in the center of a multi-directional energetic storm. One current flows east, another west, another backward into memory, another downward into density. And the soul, still sensitive, still adjusting, still carrying the residue of earthly emotion, feels pulled by all of them. The result? Confusion. Delay. A kind of spiritual looping that leaves the soul circling back into the same space again and again. In ancient African and Caribbean spiritual practices, crossroads were often linked to deities of transition, beings who stood at the gates between life and death, choice and consequence. These spirits didn't guard peaceful gardens, they guarded the thresholds of chaos. The belief was that offerings left at crossroads were not just gifts, they were payments, bribes, exchanges for guidance or safe passage. That's how potent these spaces were understood to be. And while many of those traditions honored this power, they also respected its danger. Scattering ashes there would have been seen not as a blessing, but as a risk that could leave the soul caught in the liminal, unable to find its way home. This isn't about superstition. This is about vibration. A crossroads doesn't just connect roads, it collects energy. Every person who has ever passed through it leaves behind some trace, an intention, a thought, an emotional residue. Over time, that energy accumulates, and it doesn't harmonize, it collides. The result is an energetic landscape of contradiction, of overlapping frequencies and chaotic signals. It's like trying to meditate in the middle of a crowded train station. There's no stillness, no clarity, only noise. Now imagine placing cremated remains into that environment, remains that still carry the subtle frequency of a soul in transition. The dissonance becomes more than emotional, it becomes spiritual. This is why certain ancient burial practices insisted on sacred land that was untouched, undisturbed, and aligned with the natural elements. The placement of the body, or the ashes, was never arbitrary. It was strategic, intuitive, energetically informed. The goal was to support the soul's release, not to entangle it further in the maze of earthly confusion. And yet today, without this understanding, people scatter ashes at crossroads simply because they associate it with movement, or with significance, or because the location is conveniently symbolic. But spiritual convenience is not the same as spiritual safety. Crossroads fragment energy, that is their nature. What enters does not stay whole, it splits, it divides, it redirects. And while this might be useful for travel, for decision-making, or even for magical workings, it is not suitable for anchoring the energy of a departed soul. A soul that has just left the body is in a state of extreme sensitivity. It is recalibrating, realigning, searching for direction. Placing its remains in a field of contradiction is like sending a compass into a magnetic storm. The soul cannot find true north. It spirals instead, orbiting the place where its frequency was scattered, unsure of where to go. In some esoteric teachings, this kind of spiritual disorientation is referred to as echoing, a condition where the soul's signal bounces repeatedly within the same vibrational chamber, unable to move beyond it. Crossroads are ideal chambers for such echoing. Their very nature amplifies uncertainty. And once a soul becomes accustomed to returning to the same energetic imprint, especially one imprinted through ashes, it can find itself looping through familiar emotional patterns, replaying memories, or remaining energetically attached to the crossroads themselves. That's not peace, that's purgatory. You may think you're honoring your loved one by placing them at a spot that meant something to them in life, a road where they made a big decision, or a junction they passed every day. But energy doesn't care about sentiment, it responds to resonance. And if that resonance is broken, scattered, competing with the footsteps, vehicles, and decisions of countless others, then the ashes and the soul tied to them become part of the noise, not part of the light. So here is the truth no one tells you. Crossroads are not sacred resting places. They are spiritual intersections where energies do not rest. They move, they shift, they swirl. And for a soul that has just departed this world, that movement is not liberating, it is destabilizing. It doesn't guide, it confuses, it doesn't uplift, it fragments. If you're holding ashes right now, and considering where to scatter them, do not choose the place where paths cross and diverge in all directions. That is not a place for anchoring, that is not a place for peace. That is a place for choice, for conflict, for transition, and the soul has already made its transition. Now it needs completion, clarity, rest. There are better places, places that hum with stillness, that resonate with nature, that allow the energy of the ashes to dissolve gracefully into something higher. But a crossroads will never be that place. Because a crossroads is not an ending, it is not even a beginning, it is an endless in-between, and no soul should be left circling the in-between. There's something sacred about the land where your ancestors rest. If you've ever walked through a family burial ground, you may have felt it. A subtle, quiet, a grounding energy, a familiarity that transcends time. It's not just about knowing who is buried there. It's about energetic memory, a field of resonance that holds centuries of familial vibration. Burial grounds connected to one's lineage form a grid, a kind of spiritual net, where the souls of the departed, while no longer physically present, still harmonize with one another through shared blood, shared karma, shared energy. It's this resonance that creates what some ancient traditions refer to as ancestral sanctity, a vibrational continuity that offers protection, peace, and spiritual coherence to those who pass within that lineage. When someone is cremated and their ashes are scattered or buried in a cemetery that holds no ancestral connection, the spiritual field reacts. It doesn't reject them with hostility, rather, it confuses the vibrational codes. The frequency of the new ashes doesn't match the energetic history of the space. It's like placing a musical note into a symphony where it doesn't belong. Instead of blending, it creates a dissonance, and the soul, still retaining fragments of consciousness during its transition, can feel this discord. It may try to integrate into the field, to align with the vibrations of the other resting souls, but without shared karmic lineage, the result is energetic entanglement. This entanglement isn't malevolent, it's misaligned. Souls buried in their own ancestral grounds naturally rest in fields that are aligned to their life's frequency. These grounds hold the vibrational signatures of family patterns, shared struggles, generational growth, and even inherited spiritual lessons. When you are placed within that field, your energy is recognized. It finds a home, there is familiarity, there is peace. But when ashes are introduced into a burial space of foreign lineage, the spiritual memory of that place doesn't know how to receive you. It doesn't resonate with your past. It doesn't understand your soul's coding, and this confusion can delay your soul's departure from the earth plane. In some cases, the energy of the existing cemetery can be so dense, so layered with unresolved ancestral patterns of others, that your presence becomes absorbed rather than held. Your soul, in an effort to find clarity, may attach to those frequencies in search of identity, and when that happens, the soul can become spiritually adopted into an ancestral grid that was never its own. This adoption isn't ceremonial or acknowledged, it's energetic. The soul unconsciously aligns with memories, pain, or karma that belong to someone else's bloodline. This can create strange patterns, both for the soul that has departed and for those still living who were connected to it. Imagine scattering ashes into a field of grief that doesn't belong to you, or placing remains near a lineage still burdened by unresolved trauma. The soul, delicate in its post-death transition, can begin to pick up those frequencies, absorbing burdens that were never part of its original path. Instead of completing its own karmic journey, the soul may start carrying the residue of other lineages. That's how spiritual confusion begins. What should have been a simple, sacred release becomes a journey through someone else's unfinished business. And from there, spiritual rest becomes complicated. Some traditions knew this deeply and took great care to prevent it. In many indigenous cultures, only those born into a tribe were permitted to be buried on tribal land. It wasn't a matter of exclusion, it was a matter of energy. They understood that the ancestors walked within that soil. Their stories, their wisdom, and their energy still pulsed through the ground. To place a foreign soul in that space disrupted the pattern. It could disturb the sleep of those already at rest and confuse the direction of the one who had just arrived. In some ancient Asian customs, the alignment of burial sites was calculated with immense care, based on the family's energy, geography, and spiritual calendar. Burial outside of the bloodline was seen not just as a cultural taboo, but as a vibrational misstep. There are many modern cemeteries today where lineage isn't even considered. Spaces are bought, plots are sold, and ashes are placed where convenience dictates, not where resonance allows. But spiritual law doesn't bend to convenience. Energy still responds. The vibrational misalignment remains. This is why some people report dreams or strange feelings long after ashes are placed in unfamiliar cemeteries. The soul may be unsettled, still searching for its place among a family it doesn't recognize, whispering through the veil in confusion, longing for a vibrational field that will finally feel like home. This is not to say that burial must always be limited to blood relatives. In some rare cases, chosen family, souls who are bonded through spiritual connection, not genetics, can share a frequency strong enough to allow peaceful rest. But even then, intention matters. Ritual matters. The energy of the act must be clear and aligned. Simply scattering ashes without spiritual permission, from the land, from the soul, from the ancestral energies already present, opens the door to spiritual interference. What often goes unnoticed is that cemeteries are not neutral places. They are living grids of vibration. Each grave is not just a memory, it is a resting point of energy. When too many misaligned frequencies accumulate in one place, the field becomes chaotic. That chaos doesn't always manifest as horror stories or hauntings. Sometimes it shows up as quiet heaviness, sudden emotional turbulence, or a lingering sense that something isn't at peace. You may not see it, but you feel it. You carry it without knowing why. When a soul is placed within its rightful ancestral field, something different happens. The field opens, the energy integrates. The frequency of the ashes begins to dissolve, not through disappearance, but through alignment. That alignment allows the soul to continue its journey. There's no need for attachment. The energy knows it is held. This is vibrational anchoring at its most sacred. The soul is not clinging, it is resting. The living are not burdened, they are blessed. If you've ever considered scattering ashes in a cemetery that holds no bloodline or spiritual connection, pause. Ask yourself, does this place recognize the soul I'm about to place here? Does the earth know them? Will the ancestors surrounding this space welcome them, or will they remain a stranger among echoes they do not understand? Honor the soul by giving it more than a place to lie. Give it resonance. Give it a field where its story is remembered not by names on stone, but by the vibration it shares with those around it. Spiritual rest is not just about silence, it's about alignment. The soul does not ask for grand rituals. It asks for remembrance, for recognition, and for the freedom to return home, not just in spirit, but in vibration. There's something deeply human about the desire to keep the ashes of a loved one close. When someone you love leaves this world, the silence they leave behind is deafening, and in that silence, you may find yourself grasping for anything that still carries their essence. The urn becomes more than just a container. It becomes a symbol of connection, a thread to something that once felt eternal. Keeping ashes inside your home can feel like the most loving thing you can do. After all, how could you possibly send what's left of them away? You want to protect them. You want to hold on. But what if that act of holding on is the very thing that holds them back? It's not an easy thing to hear, especially when your heart is still grieving. But the truth is, love, when not balanced by wisdom, can become a binding energy. It can tether a soul to a space where it no longer belongs. When you keep ashes inside your home, you're not just preserving memory, you may also be preserving attachment. And attachment, in the energetic realm, is more than just emotion. It's a frequency, a chord, a pull that can anchor a transitioning soul to the density of the physical plane long after the body has been released. After the moment of death, the soul doesn't simply vanish. It enters a passage, a sacred corridor between worlds, and in that corridor, it seeks release. Not abandonment, not forgetfulness, but release. A letting go of form, identity, emotion, memory. But when the ashes are kept in a space still filled with the day-to-day vibrations of earthly life, that release becomes complicated. The home is not a neutral container. It is charged with energy, living, moving, shifting energy. It carries the frequencies of conversation, of meals, of laughter, of arguments, of silence, of routine. It holds the weight of every joy and every wound that unfolds between its walls. When ashes are kept in such a place, the soul may feel that it cannot leave, especially if the people in that space are still emotionally attached to the physical remnants of what was. The soul, feeling that pull, may linger, not because it wants to, but because it senses that it must. It hears your grief, it feels your longing, it recognizes your pain, and in that recognition, it may remain nearby, not fully departed, not fully transitioned, but hovering in a liminal space, waiting for a permission you never realized it needed. This is not about ghosts. This is about resonance. The vibration of your emotional state creates a field. And if that field is saturated with loss, with unspoken words, with, "I wish I had more time," that energy doesn't just stay with you, it reaches the soul. And because love transcends dimensions, the soul responds. It may attempt to comfort, it may attempt to stay, but in doing so, it delays its own unfolding. What is meant to dissolve into light instead remains partially grounded in matter, in memory, in the emotional undercurrents of your living space. And it's not just your emotions that matter. The home environment itself is filled with waves of frequency. Television static, cell phone radiation, shouted words, music that carries unfiltered emotion, the electromagnetic hum of appliances and technology, all of it creates noise. To us, it's background. But to a soul in transition, that noise can be deafening. It muddies the subtle channels the soul needs to ascend. The light it follows becomes blurred by the pulse of human distraction. And when that confusion is combined with the energetic pull of a loved one still clinging to the ashes, the soul finds itself in limbo. Not because of punishment, but because of presence. It's too close to the density of what it was, and not yet released into what it could become. There's also something else, something rarely spoken of, but often felt. That feeling of heaviness that settles over the home. The subtle sense that time has stopped moving. The awareness that no matter how many months pass, there's still a room in your house that feels like it belongs to someone who isn't physically there. These are not just symptoms of grief. Sometimes, they are signals of an unfinished release. You may find yourself unable to move certain objects. You may keep the room exactly the same. You may talk to the ashes as though the person still resides within them, and while this brings comfort in the short term, it also creates entanglement. You are holding on, and they are holding back. Neither one of you is fully where you are supposed to be. In spiritual terms, this is known as vibrational entrapment through emotional anchoring. The ashes become a focal point of unresolved emotion. And while intention matters, your love, your devotion, your mourning, the energetic result remains the same. The soul cannot ascend if the weight of your longing pulls it back, just as you cannot fully heal if the presence of their remains continually reopens the wound. This is not about shame, it's about awareness. You are not doing something wrong by keeping the ashes. You are doing something human. But there comes a moment when love must evolve. When the most sacred act of love is not holding on, but letting go. When you shift from possession to reverence, from presence to release. There are ways to honor your loved one without keeping their remains in your daily living space. You can create a sacred altar in nature. You can scatter the ashes in a place that holds spiritual harmony. You can perform a release ritual with intention, with blessing, with the deep knowing that letting go is not the same as forgetting. In fact, it's the highest form of remembrance. And for the soul, that act is liberation. It sends a message across dimensions. You are free, you are loved, you may rise. Because energy never dies, it transforms. And when you allow their ashes to be placed in a field that supports that transformation, the soul moves on with peace, with ease, with dignity, and so do you. If you're still holding their ashes right now, I invite you to feel into this truth, not with your mind, but with your heart. Ask yourself, are you holding on to keep them close, or are you afraid of what it means to truly let them go? Either answer is sacred, but only one allows both you and them to continue evolving. Sometimes, the most powerful goodbye is the one that whispers, "Thank you for loving me. Now fly." There are places in this world where the air feels heavy, even when the sky is clear. You've felt it before, stepping into a space that should seem ordinary, yet something inside you tightens. It could be an old building, a quiet stretch of land, or a street corner with no visible scars. But deep down, you sense that something happened there, something that was never resolved. That feeling is not imagination, it's energy, and more specifically, it's the energetic residue left behind by tragedy and violence. These locations are not just stained by memory, they are saturated by it. They carry the vibrational imprint of the emotions that unfolded there. Pain, fear, anger, despair. And those vibrations linger long after the physical events have ended. Energy is not limited by time. When profound emotional events occur, especially those involving suffering or death, the energy generated doesn't simply vanish, it embeds itself into the space. Battlefields are some of the clearest examples. Walk through one, and even generations later, you'll feel a solemn pressure in the atmosphere. The ground has soaked up screams, terror, sacrifice, and desperation. That energy creates a field, a non-physical atmosphere, that lives on invisibly. But battlefields are only one expression. Natural disaster zones, sites of mass suffering, homes where violence occurred, places where people have taken their own lives, all of these become emotional containers. They don't just echo with what happened, they radiate it. These sites develop a kind of emotional charge. Just like electricity leaves a current, intense emotion leaves an energetic frequency that permeates everything: the air, the soil, the stones. Even if a building is torn down and something new is built, the charge can remain, embedded in the foundation. And when you bring cremated remains into these spaces, you're not just releasing ashes, you're immersing the soul in a field of unresolved energy. The soul, still in a state of transition, is open, unshielded, impressionable. It's not yet fully detached from its earthly vessel, nor has it ascended into clarity. This in-between state makes it highly sensitive to the frequencies around it. Imagine releasing the ashes of someone you love into a place where hundreds or thousands of others have died violently, unexpectedly, or in pain. That vibration doesn't lift the soul, it anchors it. The energetic density acts like quicksand. instead of helping the soul move on, it pulls at the remaining threads of consciousness, confusing its direction. These trauma-charged locations are often layered with conflicting emotions. Fear, anger, regret, and guilt swirl together into an invisible fog. And while you may not see it, a soul passing through that space feels it instantly. In these conditions, the soul becomes what many mystics call an energetic sponge. It absorbs whatever is around it. Just as a sponge in dirty water cannot remain clean, a soul immersed in a polluted emotional field cannot remain untouched. The frequencies of the environment start to mingle with the soul's energy. And because the soul is still shedding its earthly identity, it may confuse these external frequencies with its own unresolved emotions. The result is spiritual confusion. Instead of moving toward lightness and freedom, the soul begins to process pain that doesn't even belong to it. It may try to resolve traumas that it never lived through, carry sadness that is not its own, or feel tethered to a suffering that is part of the collective, not the personal. This can also lead to the soul remaining partially earthbound, caught between planes, unable to detach completely because it has accidentally taken on vibrational weight. It's like someone trying to fly with stones in their pockets. And it doesn't just affect the dead, it affects the living too. Those who scattered the ashes may find themselves weighed down emotionally in the weeks and months that follow, not realizing that a subtle energetic link was formed between them, the soul, and the place where it was released. This link can manifest as recurring dreams, sudden anxiety, or unexplained sadness. The living may unconsciously begin to carry the burden the soul was never meant to pick up in the first place. In ancient traditions, there was deep caution around releasing ashes in places marked by suffering. Temples were built to bless and purify spaces that had once seen bloodshed. Ceremonies were held to cleanse the land, to help souls find peace after battle or disaster. It was understood that if the energy was not cleared, it could ensnare others. That same wisdom applies today. Just because a place looks beautiful, quiet, or historically significant, does not mean it is spiritually safe. Not all scenic overlooks are clean portals. Some are scars dressed in sunlight, and when you place the ashes of someone you love into that kind of wound, you unknowingly place their soul into an energetic echo chamber of unresolved trauma. This is not about fear, this is about reverence. The soul deserves to be released into a space that lifts, not a space that loops. When a soul is released into nature, pure nature, where no significant human suffering has occurred, the elements can begin to do their sacred work. Water purifies, air liberates, earth stabilizes, fire transforms. But when you bring ashes into a field of trauma, you interrupt that natural process. The elements cannot fully help because the frequency of suffering overrides the purity. The soul becomes trapped in noise, trying to make sense of what it feels. Some of the most dangerous emotional imprints are the ones left by suicide. Sites where people have taken their own lives carry a charge of despair so deep that it creates a kind of psychic whirlpool. Not all souls are affected the same way, but for a soul that died peacefully, being released in such a location can introduce a dissonant frequency, an emotion of hopelessness that doesn't belong to them. And if the soul still has emotional ties to the living, if it feels a sense of responsibility, guilt, or unfinished love, it may try to linger to help, not realizing that it's being pulled deeper into spiritual confusion. Likewise, disaster zones, places where sudden death occurred on a large scale, have dense emotional layers that are nearly impossible to clear without deliberate and prolonged spiritual work. Scattering ashes there might seem noble or symbolic, but the energetic cost is high. The soul may lose its sense of personal identity and become entangled with the collective pain. When this happens, it no longer knows which emotions are its own. It starts to process unresolved traumas of others, and its own transition becomes delayed. Instead of expanding into its next plane of awareness, it remains suspended, not out of punishment, but because the energetic field it entered is too dense to navigate. Even if your intentions are pure, even if your desire is to honor the memory of the departed, the vibration of the environment always matters. Energy doesn't respond to what we mean, it responds to what we do. That's why you must treat the placement of ashes not just as a ritual, but as a spiritual transmission. You are sending the soul somewhere. And just like you wouldn't send someone you love into a room filled with anguish and rage, you should not send their remains into a field of unresolved pain. The most profound gift you can offer the dead is clarity, and clarity comes from conscious placement. If you feel drawn to a place where tragedy occurred, ask yourself why. Is it emotional? Is it symbolic? Or is it truly resonant? Feel the energy of the place with your entire being. Does it uplift? Or does it weigh you down? Does it welcome you with stillness? Or does it press against your heart? The body may be gone, but the energy remains. And what you do with that energy is not a small decision, it's a final act of love. Water has always been seen as sacred, a purifier of the soul, a bridge between realms, and a carrier of transformation. From the rivers that cleanse the spirit in ancient rites, to the tears that mark grief and love alike, water has been revered not just for its physical properties, but for its spiritual essence. Cultures across the world have bathed the dead in sacred streams, performed rites at the banks of holy rivers, and scattered ashes into flowing water, with the belief that the current would carry the soul to its next destination. And for a long time, that belief was honored with reverence because water was pure. It was alive in a way modern people have forgotten. But now, as oceans grow acidic, rivers carry chemical runoff, and lakes suffocate beneath layers of waste, we must ask a difficult question. What happens to the soul when the waters we return it to are no longer clean? You may feel drawn to scatter ashes in the sea. There's something poetic about it, the idea of release, of return, of flowing into something greater. It's deeply intuitive, because the soul recognizes water as a transitional force. But what most don't realize is that water is not a passive element. It is not just a background to your ritual, it is an active participant. It either lifts and purifies energy, or it traps and distorts it. And that ability depends entirely on its vibrational state. The clearer the water, the more easily it supports the release of spiritual residue. The more corrupted it becomes, the more it interferes with the sacred process of dissolution. Imagine a sacred spring nestled in the heart of a pristine forest. Its waters are still, crystalline, singing in tones too high for the human ear. This kind of water has been honored in ancient temples for centuries, not just for healing the body, but for opening the subtle gateways between the material and spiritual planes. Now compare that to an industrial canal lined with rusting metal, oil slicks on the surface, dead fish floating in the shallows. Though both are technically water, energetically they are galaxies apart. One amplifies life, the other distorts it. And when you introduce something as spiritually delicate as cremated remains into a body of water, that difference becomes everything. Ashes carry vibrational residue, not just of the physical body, but of the life, the thoughts, the attachments of the person who once was. When these ashes are placed into clean water, the elements help disintegrate those residual frequencies. They assist in the soul's detachment. In many traditions, this moment was considered sacred, a kind of alchemical merging. The water didn't just wash away the ash, it transmuted it. It turned sorrow into light. But when the same ritual is performed in polluted waters, the ash doesn't find transmutation, it finds stagnation. The heavy, dense frequencies of contaminated water don't lift the soul's imprint, they confuse it. Instead of dissolving, the energy lingers. It may become disoriented, scattered, or caught in a vibrational echo that delays the soul's release. What's happening beneath the surface is far more than chemical. Water holds memory, it reflects consciousness. Even in the most ancient teachings, water was believed to respond to prayer, to intention, to emotion. It is not just a substance, it is a living intelligence. And within that intelligence dwell elemental spirits, subtle beings once called water devas, or undines. These are the stewards of the natural order, the caretakers of the spiritual ecosystem. But these beings, too, are sensitive to energy. In pure waters, they dance, they glow, they bless, but in polluted waters, they retreat. They withdraw their presence because the vibrational environment becomes uninhabitable. It's not unlike how certain wildlife vanishes from a poisoned lake. The same happens in the unseen world. When you scatter ashes into polluted waters, it's not just the physical toxins that matter, it's the absence of spiritual intelligence. The absence of beings that were once present to help carry that soul upward, to bless the transition. Without them, the water becomes inert. It cannot support the release. And the soul, already detached from the body, finds itself immersed in a field that offers no guidance, no lifting, no sacred current to follow. It's like stepping onto what looks like a bridge, only to discover it leads nowhere. The ritual is performed, but the energy remains incomplete, and that incompletion is not always visible to the living, but it is deeply felt by the one who has crossed. You might wonder, what's the harm? Isn't the soul strong enough to move on regardless? Sometimes, yes, but not always. Especially if the passing was sudden, or if the soul was still deeply attached to the physical world. In those cases, the environment surrounding the ashes matters immensely. Polluted water doesn't just lack purification, it can anchor residual frequencies that act as spiritual weights. They slow down the soul's recalibration. They dim the internal compass that points toward the light. And in some cases, they draw the soul's attention back to the earth, back to unfinished business, back to pain or confusion, all because the environment failed to provide the clarity that water, in its purest state, was always meant to offer. There is also a deeper consequence. When we place ashes into water that has been defiled, we not only affect the soul's release, we further contaminate the sacred contract between humanity and nature. The ritual of returning a body to the elements is not one-sided. It is a dialogue, a partnership. And when that dialogue happens in polluted spaces, the imbalance deepens. The water, already struggling to maintain its own frequency, now receives the imprint of unresolved death, and in doing so, the cycle becomes heavier, not just for the departed, but for the earth itself. This isn't about guilt, it's about awareness. It's about recognizing that just because something looks symbolic, doesn't mean it's energetically aligned. You may feel the waves are soothing. You may believe that scattering ashes in the sea is an act of love, and it can be, if the sea is clean, if the water is alive, if the intention is matched by the environment's vibration. But in places where marine life has vanished, where plastic drifts like ghosts beneath the surface, where the scent of chemicals rides the breeze, those waters no longer carry the current of spiritual clarity, they carry confusion, and the soul deserves more than that. So before you stand at the edge of a river or a shoreline and open that urn, ask yourself, what is the state of this water? Does it feel alive or forgotten? Does it sing or does it mourn? Is it capable of carrying your loved one toward the light, or will it echo back the noise of a world still healing from its own neglect? If you truly want to honor the soul, choose water that reflects the divine. A mountain spring, a sacred waterfall, a place where the wind is clean and the sky remembers the stars. Because water is not just a vessel, it's a gate, and when the soul crosses that threshold, it deserves to do so in the arms of purity, not in the shadows of decay. There are certain places on this planet that pulse with energy, but not the kind that uplifts or heals. These are environments charged with fragmented emotion, desire without direction, chaos disguised as celebration. Places like nightclubs, casinos, red light districts, or venues built around indulgence and escapism are often romanticized in culture as spaces of freedom, pleasure, and thrill. But beneath the surface, they are spiritually scattered zones, energetic arenas where the soul does not rise, it disperses. These places are not neutral. They do not merely house the activities of the living. They absorb energy, amplify it, and recycle it in patterns that can be deeply disruptive to both the incarnated and the departed. When you step into a nightclub, you might be struck by the beat, the lights, the rush of bodies moving without inhibition. But if you were to strip away the distraction of sound and motion, and observe the frequency of what's happening on an energetic level, you would notice a different kind of rhythm. The aura fields of those present are often pierced by the intensity of desire, intoxication, or emotional release. People enter these environments to escape, to forget, to seek validation through experience. What this creates, energetically, is a space of leakage. Emotions are thrown outward, without grounding. Intentions become distorted, aura fields thin, and the space itself becomes a sponge for all of it, pulling in unresolved emotion, repressed trauma, and the unconscious shadows of everyone who enters. Casinos, too, radiate this scattered energy. Behind the glamour of flashing lights and ringing machines lies a vibration of compulsion, obsession, and loss. There is no clarity here, only the cycle of hope and despair spinning endlessly. Every bet carries a frequency. Every win creates a spike of adrenaline. Every loss, a drop in vibration. The walls of these places remember every desperate prayer, every clenched jaw, every whispered curse. Over time, the energy becomes heavy with unresolved longing, an atmosphere of spiritual depletion. It is in this vibrational soup that ashes, if scattered, can become spiritually disoriented. In red light districts, the energy becomes even more complex. Lust, need, pain, disconnection, all of it coexists within the same space. These areas carry the compounded residue of years, sometimes centuries, of transactions that lacked true heart connection. The energy of the body may have been engaged, but the soul was often absent. In such environments, the aura is not strengthened, it is splintered. People come in with wounds, they leave with more, and the field surrounding these spaces holds the weight of that cumulative fragmentation. Now imagine releasing the ashes of someone you loved into one of these places. Whether it's because they enjoyed these environments in life, or because you believed it would somehow honor them, the effect is the same. You are placing their soul's energetic residue into a location vibrating with distortion. The soul, especially just after death, is highly sensitive to its surroundings. It is seeking clarity, seeking release. But in places where indulgence reigns and intention is scattered, that clarity is replaced with confusion. Ashes placed in these environments do not dissolve peacefully. Instead, they become energetically suspended. The vibrational chaos of the location begins to interact with the residual energy of the ashes. This is where soul fragmentation becomes a real possibility. Instead of remaining whole and continuing the journey forward, parts of the soul's essence may become caught in the emotional debris of the space. If there is still emotional attachment to those environments, or if the soul is still processing unfinished patterns connected to addiction, guilt, or indulgence, it may linger, it may revisit, or worse, it may find itself unable to detach. In spiritual traditions, there is a term for what happens when fragments of soul essence become attached to foreign energy fields. It is often referred to as astral hitchhiking, when disembodied energies or fragmented aspects of a soul attach to people, places, or other entities in order to find grounding or clarity. These attachments are not malicious by nature, but they are parasitic. They draw energy without awareness. When ashes are placed in chaotic, indulgent environments, the soul is more likely to encounter disembodied energies seeking form, lost entities wandering between realms, or energetic parasites drawn to the frequency of confusion. In such cases, the soul can become linked to beings it never intended to connect with, forming cords that delay its progression or entangle it in lower astral fields. These lower astral fields are not dark in a mythological sense. They are dense, heavy, slow-moving. They are built from the frequencies of fear, attachment, obsession, and lack. They exist just beyond physical perception, and they are fed by the unconscious patterns of human behavior. Low-frequency zones, like those created by prolonged indulgence and escapism, become magnets for these energies. And when you place ashes in the midst of that density, the soul is not uplifted, it is pulled downward. You may believe that you're honoring someone's lifestyle by placing their remains in places they enjoyed in life, but death shifts the context completely. What once felt exciting to the body may now feel oppressive to the soul. What once offered distraction now offers entrapment. The The soul is no longer looking to repeat old pleasures, it is looking to complete its journey, and that journey requires lightness, detachment, peace, not the fragmented echoes of desire replaying through the walls of a building designed to drown out silence. In the chaos of these environments, intention is lost, and without intention, energy wanders. The soul's path forward becomes clouded. It may try to ascend, only to feel pulled back by the gravitational force of the environment. Or it may simply linger, still tethered by the frequency of its surroundings, looping in old patterns it was meant to release. This looping can even ripple back to the living, manifesting as sudden urges, strange behaviors, emotional disturbances, or recurring dreams. You may not realize it, but by placing the ashes of a loved one in such a space, you may have unintentionally opened a two-way energetic bridge, one that neither you nor the soul was prepared to navigate. Energy is a language. It speaks in resonance, in frequency, in alignment. When you place ashes in a space vibrating with indulgence, addiction, and escapism, you are essentially placing the soul in a room full of static. The messages from higher realms become harder to hear, guidance becomes muffled, clarity becomes rare, and in that silence, the soul waits, sometimes confused, sometimes tired, sometimes trying to reach you without the strength to rise above the noise. If you truly wish to honor someone's memory, choose a location that supports release, not repetition. Choose a place where the energy breathes, not one where it spins in circles. Let their essence dissolve into a field of peace, not a crowd of restless vibrations. You don't need flashing lights or loud music to remember them. You need silence, you need reverence, you need clarity. The soul's journey does not end at death, and what you do with the remains is not the final chapter, it is the final message. Let that message be one of freedom, not fragmentation, of peace, not entrapment, of forward motion, not spiraling repetition. What if the very places we build to celebrate life, to escape, to feel alive, are also the places most hostile to the soul once it departs the body? You see them everywhere, massive stadiums pulsing with music and lights, sprawling megamalls packed with rushing crowds and flashing signs, concert halls vibrating with the energy of thousands of emotions at once. These modern temples of entertainment are designed to consume attention, to dazzle the senses, to keep consciousness spinning outward. And while they may be thrilling for the living, they are deeply disorienting for the dead. You might think scattering someone's ashes at a place they loved in life, like the stadium of their favorite team, or the mall where they spent weekends shopping, or a music venue they adored, would be a gesture of honor, a tribute, a way of saying, this was part of you, so this is where you'll stay. But the soul does not view those spaces as you do. Because once the body is gone, the soul no longer resonates with distraction or stimulation. It seeks clarity, peace, vibration that supports release. And entertainment temples, no matter how meaningful they were in life, are the exact opposite of that. These places are not energetically still, they are vibrational storms. Every person who enters brings their own field of energy, joy, rage, hunger, loneliness, desire. Multiply that by thousands, and you have a massive, swirling current of emotional noise. That energy doesn't vanish when the crowds leave, it lingers, it saturates the space. Over time, it forms a kind of spiritual residue, an energetic atmosphere that becomes embedded in the structure itself. The walls remember. The floor hums with the emotional footprints of every foot that has ever walked across it. For the living, this is why such places feel alive. But for the soul, especially one trying to detach from the physical world, it's overwhelming. The subtle body, the energetic shell that surrounds the soul shortly after death, is delicate. It's like mist, highly reactive to frequency. When that mist is placed into a vibrational hurricane, it cannot hold shape. It splinters, it becomes confused, it absorbs what isn't its own, and that confusion can delay the soul's ability to transition into higher planes. Spiritual clarity requires space, not just physical room, but energetic room, stillness, silence, a kind of vibrational cleanliness that allows the soul's own frequency to rise without interference. Entertainment centers are filled with the opposite. They are sensory battlegrounds. Even when empty, they retain the echo of stimulation. The loud music, the flashing lights, the emotional highs and lows of massive crowds, it all builds a kind of energetic fog, and ashes scattered in these places don't dissolve into light. They become part of the feedback loop. There's another layer. These environments don't just hold individual emotion, they hold collective programming. These are the temples where mass consciousness is shaped, where marketing, media, and spectacle work in unison to generate desire, to focus attention outward, to feed identity through consumption and performance. This isn't a judgment, it's an observation. These spaces carry agendas. They are energetic theaters, where the collective mind is directed, fragmented, and distracted. And when the soul enters a space like that, either through the scattering of its ashes or its lingering emotional ties, it doesn't just get lost, it gets absorbed. Some souls are highly sensitive to energy, especially those who died suddenly or with unresolved emotions. These souls look for familiarity, and if they spent a lot of time in a certain place during life, the vibrational memory of that place can act like a magnet. If ashes are placed there, the pull is even stronger. The soul may return again and again, caught in the energy of memory, without realizing it's no longer supposed to be there. This creates looping. Not physical haunting, but energetic entrapment. A pattern where the soul remains attached to a version of life that no longer exists, in an environment that doesn't support its evolution. This is why scattering ashes in places of high emotional imprint is dangerous. It's not about superstition, it's about spiritual mechanics. Energy responds to energy. And if the soul's final resting place is an environment designed to keep consciousness outward, it won't be supported in going inward. The soul needs the quiet of the inner world to make peace with what was and prepare for what's next. But the bright lights of entertainment temples drown out that inner call. Even worse, these places often act as amplifiers. They magnify whatever energy is present, so if grief, confusion, or deep attachment is felt during the scattering ritual, that energy becomes imprinted into the space and mirrored back to the soul. Instead of lifting off, the soul is caught in a loop of emotional resonance, unable to distinguish its own frequency from the noise around it. Imagine trying to sing your own soul's song in the middle of a stadium, still ringing with the shouts and cries of millions. The voice is lost, the path is blurred, and then there's the issue of movement. These places are designed for constant flow of people, sound, money, information. That flow creates turbulence on the energetic plane. Not the kind that refreshes, the kind that destabilizes. If the soul is still integrating its departure, if it's still adjusting to being without a body, turbulence can cause disorientation. It can lead to fragmentation, where the soul's energy becomes scattered, unable to coalesce into a clear, luminous form. It's like trying to meditate on a roller coaster. The environment simply doesn't allow for stillness. All of this points to one essential truth. These are not sacred exit points. They are not places of completion. They are not spaces that hold the frequency of transcendence. They are arenas, markets, performance chambers. They mirror the collective hunger for distraction, for sensation, for identity built on image and noise, and the soul, no longer tethered to those desires, must be allowed to move beyond them. When you choose a final resting place for someone's ashes, you are creating a vibrational bridge. That bridge can lead to release, to peace, to elevation. Or it can lead to confusion, to entrapment, to looping. Entertainment temples, no matter how meaningful they were in life, do not carry the energy of release. They carry the energy of entanglement. And to place a soul in that current is to bind it, however unknowingly, to a cycle it is meant to transcend. You can honor their memory without anchoring their essence to a place that cannot help them ascend. Let the songs, the stadium cheers, the laughter and memories stay in your heart. But let the soul go to a place where it can rest, where it can rise. Choose silence over spectacle, nature over noise, vibration over nostalgia. Because in the unseen world, where energy is everything, intention alone is not enough. Alignment matters, and when you align with the sacred, you open the doorway for the soul to continue its journey home. Not every resting place is created equal, and not every scattering is a release. What most people don't realize is that the moment after death is not an end, but a passage, a movement, a continuation of energy. The body may fall away, but the soul, delicate, impressionable, and still unraveling from its earthly imprint, begins a process of reorientation. In this sacred in-between, clarity becomes essential, silence becomes holy, and resonance becomes the key to ascension. The soul cannot move toward its next state if it is surrounded by noise, if it is submerged in confusion, if the vibrations of its final resting place pull it downward instead of lifting it toward light. There are laws, not man-made, but woven into the fabric of spiritual design, that determine whether the soul rises cleanly or becomes entangled in what remains unfinished. One of these laws is simple in words but profound in impact. Like attracts like. Vibrations do not randomly collide, they magnetize to frequencies that match or mirror their own. That means the frequency of the place where ashes are scattered matters deeply. The ashes are not just physical, they carry the residual imprint of the soul's last experience on earth. If that imprint is placed in a location of low vibration, the frequency of the soul's departure is altered. The soul, sensitive to its environment, resonates with what surrounds it. If placed in chaos, it absorbs dissonance. If placed in serenity, it aligns with peace. This is why clarity matters. The clearer the environment, the easier it is for the soul to recognize its next step. Silence is not emptiness in the spiritual sense. It is space, room for the soul's own vibration to emerge, to settle, to breathe. When ashes are placed in places filled with noise, literal or energetic, the soul may struggle to find its own resonance within the clutter. It's like trying to hear your own thoughts inside a crowded marketplace. The energy of the surroundings will always speak louder unless the space is intentionally prepared to hold stillness. And it is in that stillness that the soul can begin its spiral upward. The spiral path of ascension is not linear. It moves in layers, in circles that expand rather than climb. It's a motion that mimics the growth of nature, the unfolding of a flower, the swirling of a galaxy, the halls of a seashell. This spiral is a sacred geometry embedded in all things, a blueprint of return to source. When a soul departs the body, it begins this spiral inward and upward, a path that requires alignment, resonance, and detachment. The ashes, being a physical echo of the soul, play a role in that process. Where they are placed becomes a point of energetic influence. A low-frequency location can slow the spiral. A high-frequency location can accelerate it. This is not metaphor, it is energy in motion. To understand this fully, you have to return to the wisdom of the elements: air, water, earth, and fire. Not just as physical states, but as spiritual archetypes. Each soul, while made of the same source light, resonates more strongly with certain elemental vibrations, based on its life's journey, karmic imprints, and inner constitution. Some souls are waterbound, fluid, emotional, intuitive, and feel most at peace near rivers, lakes, and oceans that are clean and undisturbed. Others are earth-aligned, grounded, steady, rooted, and rest best in ancient forests, mountains, or fertile valleys. Then there are souls of air, expansive, intellectual, light, who release more easily in high altitudes, wind-blown plains, or open sky. And some are fire-aligned, passionate, transformational, intense, who find their resonance through ceremonial flame, sacred bonfires, or volcanic lands. When the ashes are placed in an environment that matches the soul's elemental frequency, something powerful happens. The environment doesn't just hold the remains, it receives them. The resonance between the soul and the element allows for dissolving, not erasure, but integration. The ashes dissolve into the earth or disperse into the wind, not as a final act, but as a sacred exchange. In that exchange, the soul feels recognized, affirmed, aligned, And that alignment acts as a bridge, lifting the soul gently into the next spiral, the next layer of being, the next octave of light. But when ashes are scattered in environments that conflict with the soul's frequency, the opposite occurs. The element resists. The field does not accept. The energy remains suspended. The soul may feel disoriented, unreceived, misplaced. It is like trying to plant a seed in soil that cannot hold it. The result is stagnation, fragmentation, and in some cases, looping, where the soul circles the same energetic space again and again, unable to detach fully because the environment does not support its release. This is not about choosing a beautiful place. Beauty is not the same as resonance. A stunning coastline may be vibrationally discordant. A silent patch of desert may be the most spiritually aligned. What matters is frequency, feel, alignment. That's why, before scattering ashes, one must ask, not just what looks sacred, but what feels sacred. The body may be gone, but the soul still responds to vibration. It hears the energy. It listens. This is why so many ancient cultures performed rites before placing ashes or remains into the earth. They would speak to the land, ask permission, cleanse the space, and call upon the elements to harmonize with the soul, not out of tradition alone, but because they understood the spiritual laws of placement. They knew that the environment acts as either a portal or a prison, a channel or a cage. The ashes become the final message to the earth about that soul's story. The earth either receives that message and translates it upward into light, or it holds it in waiting, confused by the lack of resonance. There is no formula for perfect placement, but there is attunement, and it begins with listening. You listen with your body, your breath, your intuition. You ask the land if it will hold what you are offering. You ask the soul if it feels welcomed by the elements of that place. You observe the signs, the stillness in the trees, the clarity in the air, the peace in your chest. If the environment feels heavy, disjointed, or resistant, do not place the ashes there, no matter how convenient, symbolic, or scenic it may appear. The soul deserves more than sentiment. It deserves vibrational respect. This is not about honoring the personality they once had. It is about supporting the journey they are now on. And that journey is one of expansion. The ashes must be placed where the spiral can continue, not where it is disrupted. The energy must be given to the element that sings back to it, not to one that stays silent. So when you are faced with the decision of where to place ashes, treat it not as a task to complete, but as a ceremony to open. Understand that the soul is listening, that the earth is listening, that what you do now speaks volumes in the language of energy. And when you choose clarity over convenience, silence over spectacle, resonance over routine, you allow the final breath of that soul to become not an echo, but a melody. A song that rises on the spiral path, lifted by the very elements that once sustained it in life. What if I told you that death does not guarantee peace, that the moment the body is laid to rest, or scattered into wind, water, or earth, is not the end of the story, but only a crossroads? And if the laws that govern that transition are ignored, if the energy is mishandled, if the release is incomplete, then the soul may not ascend as it's meant to. It may linger, loop, echo back into the world it's trying to leave. And it doesn't just affect the departed, it affects you, the living, the ones left behind, often without realizing that something was left undone. When spiritual laws are violated during the scattering of ashes, the impact isn't always immediate. There's no thunderclap, no dramatic sign that something has gone wrong. Instead, what happens is quiet, subtle, and deeply entangling. The soul doesn't vanish, but neither does it rise. It becomes caught, suspended between planes, tethered by emotion, by memory, or by the frequency of the location where the ashes were placed. It's not a punishment, it's resonance. Energy goes where it's matched. And when ashes are scattered in places that vibrate with confusion, chaos, distraction, or density, the energetic imprint of the soul becomes fragmented. What should have been a graceful departure becomes a disoriented circling. This circling is sometimes described in spiritual teachings as looping. The soul repeats moments, places, and emotional patterns because it cannot fully move beyond them. It finds itself returning to the same space, often the location of its ashes, over and over, not out of choice, but out of inertia. The vibrational cords are still active. The body may be gone, but the connection remains, and when that connection isn't consciously and ceremonially released, it becomes an invisible thread, a binding that prevents forward motion. The consequences of this aren't confined to the soul's realm alone. They echo into the lives of those still here. People who live in homes where ashes are kept often speak of a heaviness, a sense of being watched. Recurring dreams that feature the deceased, sometimes speaking in circles, sometimes unable to leave a room. There may be sudden shifts in mood, inexplicable fatigue, or feelings of being drained in certain parts of the home. Objects fall without explanation. Cold spots linger in warm rooms. And often, there is a kind of spiritual stagnation. Projects stall, relationships falter, healing feels delayed. These are not random disturbances. They are signs of unresolved energetic ties. It's not about fear, it's about awareness. A soul that has not been fully released may unintentionally disrupt the energy field of the living, not out of malice, but out of proximity. The two worlds are meant to separate after death, not because love ends, but because the frequencies must shift. When ashes are kept in places that are energetically unstable, polluted rivers, crossroads, entertainment centers, or inside the home, that separation is delayed. The soul and the living remain partially entangled, and that entanglement often shows up as confusion on both sides. For the departed, there is disorientation. Imagine trying to walk into the light while being pulled backward by invisible threads made of grief, memory, and location. The soul may feel lost, unsure of where to go, unable to distinguish between the echo of its life and the pull of its next journey. Some remain near their ashes, not understanding why they can't move on. Others are drawn to their loved ones, sensing their pain, believing they must stay to help, but in doing so, they become stuck. And over time, that stuckness can lead to fragmentation, where the soul's energy begins to lose coherence. It begins to forget what it came from and where it's meant to go. For the living, the effects manifest in emotional and spiritual disruption. Grief lingers longer than it should. Closure never fully arrives. There's a feeling of being haunted, not necessarily by apparitions, but by a constant, low-level presence that seems to press on the edge of your awareness. Dreams become vivid, sometimes disturbing, filled with messages that don't make sense. You might see their face over and over, always looking back, never walking away, and deep inside, you feel it, that something was left incomplete. Karmically, this matters, because when a soul is not fully released, its contract with this world is not fully closed. The lessons continue to loop, not just for the soul, but for those connected to it. Emotional wounds remain open, patterns repeat. You may find yourself walking in their footsteps, repeating their choices, carrying burdens that were never yours to carry. This is not coincidence. It's energetic entanglement, a kind of karmic bleed-through caused by improper release. There are also imprints, energetic echoes that linger in physical places. You may have been in a room where the air felt heavy for no reason, or touched an object that gave you chills. These aren't just feelings. They are the residue of a soul's energetic fingerprint. When ashes are scattered in places that cannot hold them in sacred stillness, that residue becomes chaotic. It embeds in the environment. It disturbs the flow. And in some cases, it calls the soul back to it, again and again, reinforcing the loop. This is why spiritual laws matter. They are not rules meant to control you. They are guidance meant to protect both the living and the dead. These laws exist to ensure that the transition between worlds is clean, respectful, and complete. When they are followed, when ashes are returned to pure elements in sacred alignment, there is peace. The soul rises, the living heal, grief softens into gratitude, love transforms into light. But when these laws are broken, even unknowingly, the effects can echo for years, sometimes across generations. A soul that hasn't completed its departure may reincarnate prematurely, drawn back by unresolved ties, or it may hover between worlds, confused and fragmented, carrying karma that should have been dissolved. And the living, too, may feel this karmic undertow, a sense of something unfinished, a sadness that never fully clears, a love that doesn't let go. The good news is that none of this is irreversible. With awareness, the ties can be unbound. The soul can be released. Even if ashes were scattered in a place that disrupted their path, it is possible to perform a healing ritual, one that reclaims the energy and offers a proper send-off. Through intention, prayer, and sacred invocation, the energetic residue can be cleared, and the soul's path opened once again. What matters most is the recognition that something sacred needs tending. That death, too, is a process, and one that must be completed on all levels, not just the physical. If you're holding grief in your heart, and you sense that something about the goodbye wasn't complete, trust that feeling. It's not your imagination. It may be your soul calling out to make things right, not just for you, but for the one you love who may still be waiting for release. There is a quiet wisdom in honoring the journey of a soul, not by following convention, but by listening deeply to the energy that remains. When cremation is chosen, it is not just the end of the physical body, it is the transformation of form into essence. What's left behind carries a vibrational residue, not just of the life lived, but of the lessons learned, the emotions felt, and the spiritual path walked. The ashes become a final offering, not of what was lost, but of what still lingers. And where you place them speaks to whether you truly understand the sacredness of that offering. There are places in this world that do not just receive ashes, they translate them. Places that vibrate in harmony with the soul's essence. Places where the ashes do not fall, but sing. These are the sacred alternatives that spiritual wisdom traditions have always known. Sacred mountains, for instance, have long been seen as gateways between the earthly and divine. Their peaks pierce the veil between dimensions, their silence hums with ancient frequency. To place ashes upon such ground, especially in stillness and reverence, is to allow the soul to rise. Mountains like Kailash, Shasta, Fuji, or even unnamed ridges deep in untouched wilderness, carry the kind of vibrational field that helps dislodge lingering attachments and lift the soul toward the next spiral. But not just any mountain will do, it must be a place that holds purity, stillness, and a history of spiritual presence. You are not just leaving ashes, you are entrusting them to the guardians of the earth. Ancestral lands are another sacred alternative, not because of sentimental ties alone, but because of energetic lineage. When ashes return to the soil of one's ancestry, where blood, story, and memory are embedded, there is a resonance that cannot be replicated. The earth recognizes its own, the soul recognizes its field, and the process of release becomes smoother, more coherent. This return to origin is not always literal. Sometimes it is energetic. Even if someone did not live on the land of their ancestors, placing ashes where their lineage once thrived can awaken a current of remembrance that guides the soul gently home. Nature, sanctuaries, forests, untouched by human interference, and lands that pulse with elemental life also hold the frequency required for release. Trees that have stood for centuries, waterfalls that cleanse the field, meadows where wind moves freely, these spaces allow the energy of the ashes to dissolve without resistance. The earth absorbs what is given, not as waste, but as memory. In certain indigenous traditions, ashes are buried at the base of specific trees, not randomly, but in harmony with the tree's energy. Oak for strength, birch for purification, cedar for transition. These practices reflect a deep understanding that every living thing holds a vibration. And when that vibration is matched with the soul, something beautiful happens. The energy sings. Temples, both physical and natural, are also potent receivers. In Vedic tradition, cremated remains are often immersed in sacred rivers or placed near shrines after specific purification rituals. The Ganges, for example, is seen not merely as water, but as a living goddess, a conscious being who carries the soul's remnants toward liberation. In Tibetan and Himalayan regions, remains are sometimes offered in sky burials, where nature, birds, and wind complete the cycle of dissolution. These practices are not random, they are carefully timed with the soul's journey, astrologically aligned, and done with chants or prayers that guide the spirit gently out of the material realm. The ocean, particularly near natural vortexes or energetic convergence points, is another profound resting place. Not all ocean waters are equal. Some coastlines carry the heaviness of human activity, pollution, and emotional debris, but certain areas, often far from development, hold vibrational purity. These are the places where the water sings back. In esoteric traditions, these oceanic vortexes are considered spiral gates, energy points where the soul can dissolve its final earth-tethered strands and move forward. Scattering ashes in such waters, especially with intention, can be an act of sacred return, allowing the spirit to become part of the vast, eternal movement of the planetary consciousness. But even more important than location is intention. Without sacred intention, even the holiest place becomes silent. Rituals of release are not about theatricality, they are energetic blueprints. Forgiveness, for instance, is often overlooked in the scattering of ashes, yet, in many spiritual lineages, it is essential. Before the final release, the living are encouraged to speak to the soul, to offer forgiveness, to ask for it, and to release any lingering ties. This is not just for closure, it clears the cords. It tells the soul, you are free, you are not bound to my grief, to my guilt, or to what was unresolved. You are released in love, in peace, and in trust. Blessing ceremonies vary across cultures, but they often involve the elements, burning sacred herbs, chanting mantras, pouring water in spirals, or offering food and light. In some indigenous traditions, ashes are mixed with cornmeal, tobacco, or flower petals before being placed into the earth. In Vedic rituals, ghee, camphor, or sandalwood are added to the remains during prayers. These acts are not symbolic only, they infuse the ashes with harmonizing frequencies. They act as final gifts to the soul, tools to carry it across the veil. Energetic compatibility is the unspoken truth behind all of this. Just as a tuning fork responds to its matching tone, ashes respond to their environment. When placed in a location that resonates with the soul's dominant frequency, be it earth, water, wind, or fire, the ashes don't just settle, they merge. They become part of a larger field. They complete a loop, the energy hums in alignment, and the soul, sensing that harmony, moves on effortlessly. You must ask yourself not what the person liked in life, but what their soul needs now. If they were turbulent in life, do not return them to chaos. Give them stillness. If they are heavy with sorrow, place them where joy blooms gently. If they are fragmented, find a place of wholeness. Every soul carries a final note, and it longs to be played in harmony with the earth's great orchestra. That is your task, to hear that note and place it where it can be heard, not lost. Sacred alternatives are not rare, they are everywhere, waiting to be noticed. The edge of a high desert, a grove of whispering pines, a temple cave echoing with silence, the heart of a valley no map leads to. These are not just spaces, they are frequencies. And when ashes meet the right frequency, the soul sings, it releases, it expands. If you hold the remains of someone you love, know that you are holding a key, not to their past, but to their forward motion. Let that key be turned with reverence, with wisdom, and with sound, the sound of water, of wind, of fire, of earth, and of your own voice saying, you are loved, you are free, you are home. What if the soul could speak to you now, not through signs or symbols, not through dreams or fleeting memories, but clearly, directly, with no veil between your heart and its truth? What would it say? Would it ask you to keep holding on to the ashes, the room left untouched, the objects charged with memory, or would it whisper something softer, something higher? The truth is, if you could hear the soul in its purest form, you'd hear one thing above all else: let me go with love. You see, what the soul desires most after leaving the body is not possession, not preservation, not even remembrance in the way we think of it. It desires peace. Not because it wants to leave you behind, but because its journey is no longer here. The soul does not belong to this world once it sheds its form. It begins to vibrate on a finer level, seeking higher frequencies, greater clarity, and deeper unity with Source. And in that journey, it no longer clings to names, faces, or timelines. It remembers them, yes, but without attachment, without grasping. The soul wants release. It wants to be free of the weight it once carried in life, the burdens of identity, ego, pain, even the stories that defined it. And yet, it cannot fully release those things if the living continue to grasp tightly. You may not even realize you're doing it. You may think you're simply loving them. But there is a difference between love and attachment. One uplifts, the other entangles. The soul feels that difference. It senses when your grief keeps it tethered to the earth, looping through old memories and emotional imprints. It senses when your longing acts like a rope tied around its essence, and though it may try to rise, it stays near because it feels your pull, and it doesn't want to hurt you. But here's the sacred truth. You do not hurt the soul by letting go. You free it. This doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending they never existed, or that your bond was meaningless. In fact, it's the opposite. When you let go with love, you affirm the deepest truth, that love does not depend on physical proximity. That presence can exist beyond form. That your connection doesn't end when the body ends. It transforms. The soul doesn't want you to keep lighting candles in sorrow or holding back tears in silence. It wants you to live fully. It wants you to walk forward without dragging the past behind you. It wants you to choose joy, not as an escape, but as a bridge. Because joy is one of the few things that can still reach it. Joy, not grief, is how the soul feels your love once it's left this world. You might ask, but how do I let go without losing them? The answer is not to let go of them, but to let go for them. Release the parts of your grief that are bound in fear. Fear that you'll forget. Fear that they'll disappear. Fear that without your pain, your love will seem smaller. None of that is true. The soul doesn't disappear when you release it. It becomes more accessible in subtle ways. It visits through intuition, through moments of awe, through symbols that speak to your heart alone. But it can only do this if it's allowed to move on, if its essence isn't bound to a location, an urn, or an emotional weight it no longer carries. From the soul's perspective, death is not a tragedy. It's a transition, a return to something vast and timeless, a release of limitations. And though it grieves the pain you feel, it does not dwell in that pain. It is seen with new eyes. It understands more than it ever did while in the body. It no longer clings to personality, to argument, to regret. It doesn't define itself by the mistakes it made, or the things left unsaid. It wants you to know that everything unresolved has already been forgiven. That love is the only thing it has carried with it, stripped of all conditions, and it wants you to do the same. If you've kept ashes because you were afraid to let go, the soul understands. If you've spoken to an urn because it felt like the only place they still existed, the soul hears you. If you've been scared that moving forward means leaving them behind, the soul wants to reassure you. It is not behind you. It is not trapped in the past. It is expanding, becoming, integrating with something too large to be contained in memory alone. But for you to feel this, you have to make space. You have to loosen the grip. You have to allow the bond to evolve. This is the sacred invitation, to move from attachment to communion, from holding on to opening up, from clinging to honoring. Death does not take the soul away from you. It only invites a new kind of relationship, one built not on physical presence, but on spiritual resonance. You connect not through objects or places, but through vibration, through quiet moments where your heart expands beyond time. You may still light candles, you may still speak to them, but let those gestures come from peace, not longing. Let them rise from celebration, not sorrow, because the soul feels the difference. When you grieve without resistance, when you release without guilt, when you love without attachment, you become a sanctuary of light that the soul can visit, not to be trapped, but to bless and be blessed. And this, more than anything, is what the soul desires most: to be remembered in freedom, not in grief; to be loved as it truly is now, not just as it once was; to rise with your blessing, not remain with your ache. So take a breath, not just for yourself, but for them. Place your hand on your heart, and know this: they are not gone, they are transformed. They are not distant, they are in everything that moves with grace. Let them go, not because the love is over, but because it's finally big enough to set both of you free. At the edge of life, where breath becomes memory and form becomes formless, there remains one final act, one gesture, one choice, that carries far more weight than most realize. What you do with what is left behind is not just ritual, it is energy in motion. And energy listens, it responds, it echoes long after the hands have scattered, after the prayers have quieted, and after the people have left. Whether or not the soul remains aware in the way we understand, the vibration of your action becomes part of its journey. That's why you must pause. That's why this matters. You were never just managing ashes, you were holding a signature, a fragment of frequency, a still warm echo of a soul's dance through this life. In that moment, the one where you choose where to place what remains, you are not completing something, you are sending something forward, and the way you do it will either open doors or close them. It will either align the soul with peace or entangle it with residue. This is not meant to burden you, it is meant to awaken you to the sacredness of your role. Too often, the end becomes mechanical. Arrangements are made, remains are processed, locations are chosen based on beauty, tradition, or convenience. But none of those speak the language of the soul. The soul does not ask for marble monuments or grand gestures. It asks for alignment, for stillness, for remembrance that goes beyond the mind and into the realm of vibration. To honor a soul is not to place them where you feel most comfortable. It is to place them where they can finally let go. This is a call to return to reverence, to remember that every act is a transmission. Every movement made after death becomes a sentence in the soul's next story. When you treat the remains of the departed with casualness or routine, you deny the spirit its final clarity. But when you slow down, when you listen, when you choose with intention, you create a field of guidance that reaches beyond this world. You become a bridge, not a wall. The energy of your love does not disappear when the body goes, it transforms, and that transformation continues through your hands, your choices, your voice. Speak to the soul, bless them, release them. Do not scatter ashes like dust. Release them like light. Let them return to the elements that will carry them home. Let them fall into places where the earth knows how to hold them, where the air knows how to lift them, where the waters know how to cleanse them, where the fire knows how to transform what is no longer needed. There is no need for fear. Death is not a rupture, it is a return, and every soul knows the way, if it is not weighed down by what remains unfinished. Your role is not to control the path, but to clear it, to remove the stones, to quiet the noise, to say to the soul, I will not bind you with my grief, I will not hold you here with my expectations. I will not place you in a field of confusion and call it closure. I will do what love requires. I will help you rise. Can you see it? The moment after release, when the ashes touch the earth or the sea or the flame, and the soul, already half gone, fully lifts, not with resistance, but with grace. There is no sound, yet everything hums, no movement, yet everything flows. The soul does not rush, it drifts, slowly at first, like smoke caught in golden light. It rises through layers you cannot see but can feel. It passes through veils of memory, of forgiveness, of expansion. What was once heavy becomes translucent. What once clung becomes surrendered. The wind carries not just particles, but prayers. The waters receive not just remains, but echoes. The trees do not just watch, they remember. The ground does not just hold, it releases. And the soul, no longer tethered by pain, or by place, or by the misunderstanding of what death means, becomes itself again, whole, weightless, infinite. You were never meant to hold on forever, and they were never meant to stay. That is the beauty of this dance. The living let go, and the departed become light. That is how it has always been, but it only becomes sacred when you choose to see it that way. So do not rush this. Do not delegate it as if it were paperwork. Do not toss ashes as if they were sand. This is the final gift you can give, the gift of vibrational freedom. Choose places that sing. Choose silence over spectacle. Choose alignment over appearance. The soul will feel it, even if you cannot. Let this final act be a ceremony of return. Speak the words that free them. Walk with intention. Pour the water with grace. Burn the incense with purpose. Let the elements carry what you no longer need to hold, not because you are forgetting, but because you are remembering something deeper, that love does not cling, it lifts. Those endings are just beginnings in disguise, that you are not saying goodbye, you are saying, go, with all my blessing. Close your eyes now. Imagine them, not as you knew them, but as they truly are. Light spilling outward, no name, no face, just presence, just radiance. Rising higher and higher through fields of gold and sky, there is no weight now, no noise, no grief, just clarity, just peace. And as they rise, something in you rises too. A breath, a knowing, a calm. Let the ashes fall where the soul may rise.